It's pretty fun to imagine what it would be like to be on Mars, but there are so many logistics to making that happen. If you were to ask Elon when he thinks we'll be there, he predicts around 2029. But let's talk about building a habitat on Mars. Of course, getting Starship up and running and also TeslaBot is crucial for the mission to Mars. And yeah, 3D printing, like what these guys are made out of, is so important for building habitats on Mars. In fact, check this out. This project is called Marcia. It's being conducted by the AI Space Factory.
Marcia is our proposal for a Martian surface habitat.
And yes, I did try to reach out to them for an interview. It's been a few days. I haven't had a response. In fact, it's hard to tell exactly where they are with their project. NASA awarded them $500,000 to start working on this 3D printed habitat that, yes, it kind of looks like an air freshener, but they haven't had many updates in recent months or even years. What I have seen is that they're working on an NFT project, which I know some of you guys are probably rolling your eyes at that, but I've been trying to get in contact with them about where they are at with this project. They also wanted to open a project here on Earth called Terra, and that would be somewhere where you could stay here on Earth in upstate New York. So, I mean, I'd like to see that in person. So I'm kind of having trouble, finding out the timeline of this project, but let's talk about just the idea of 3D printing habitats on Mars in general. We want to use the materials on Mars because they're already there, they're accessible, and it makes this process a whole lot cheaper. Now, of course, with 3D printing, you would have to ship a printing apparatus, but still would be much more cost effective than shipping all of the construction materials needed to build on Mars. So NASA had a 3D printed Mars habitat contest back in 2018, and we learned that the winner was this Marcia habitat that you see. Space Factory's 3D print technology makes use of telemetry, data analytics, machine perception, and intelligence for wider autonomous applications. So this means that habitats on Mars will be able to build themselves without much human supervision. Now, when you're used to seeing renderings of habitats on Mars, you're probably used to seeing low-lying domes or structures that are buried underneath the ground. The Marcia design is optimized to handle internal atmospheric pressure and structural stresses, and it has this unique vertical egg-like shape. It would be made out of a mixture of basalt fiber extracted from Martian rock and renewable bioplastic. This would be derived from plants grown on Mars, eliminating the dependency on rockets to transport materials from Earth. I love watching 3D printing in action. It is so mesmerizing. And I actually had a fan make me this custom Ellie in space logo 3D printed. You even have the little heels. So it's just amazing the detail that you can achieve using a 3D printer. Check this out. 3D printing large infrastructure is quite different from the process of 3D printing something small like this model. 3D printed houses can be built using a robotic arm extruder or sand printing. The arm uses a technology known as contour crafting, and it moves around on rails and prints the house layer by layer, just like a normal 3D printer. Also, recently I had a chat with my friend Farzad Mesbahi. He has his own YouTube channel where he talks about being a former Tesla employee and what his experiences were like working for Tesla, but he's also a huge SpaceX fan, and he thinks that we need to get to Mars sooner than later. So he is proposing the idea of building Mars-like habitats here on Earth, and then yes, shipping some construction materials to Mars, which of course does have the huge flaw of costs associated with it. But he believes that there will be tremendous costs with outfitting spacesuits for the people that would need to be there. And he doesn't think that we're gonna have a functional Tesla bot that can actually build this colony on Mars as soon as we'd like. So here's more of some of his reasoning.
I view SpaceX as a company that's obviously going to be a gigantic player in many different industries over the long term. And right now, what they're doing is, it's obvious. I mean, your viewership knows this. They're just making the cost to space as cheap as humanly possible, so you can really expand the different industries you can do, including colonization of another planet, right? So it's been super, super fascinating to follow. The more I started thinking about it, what I get really drawn to is, having worked at Tesla, like my brain has now been rewired in a sense to be like, okay, so but what do we have to do to actually colonize Mars, right? So there's a lot of different things that that a lot of people talk about, well, you need to get the rockets there, then you need to get people there, you need to get, some sort of materials there, you got to build out the bases, whatever that means. But I'm really starting to gain a lot of interest and starting thinking about what are the actual logistically speaking, exactly what needs to happen for this to happen. So if we truly want to get 1 million people to Mars and make it self-sustainable, exactly what do we need to put in place to get there, and what are steps 1, 2 to 10 trillion, or whatever Elon's spreadsheet is that he has figured out to colonize Mars. Like, what does that actually look like?
Right.
And that's really starting to draw me in quite a bit. And a lot of it obviously is just me trying to think about ideas and researching topics here and there, and more of a thought exercise more than anything. But what's really interesting about that is that when you start to really think about it, you can really start seeing how the different Musk companies come together into that eventual mission of colonizing Mars, and just how much, and I hate to use this word, how many synergies there are between these different companies to enable that, I can keep going, but
why do you hate the word synergy?
I don't know, because I just remember, like, every time I heard somebody say synergy at a place that I would work at, I'm like, you're not even using it in the right context, and it's just a buzzword, It's almost like Web3, or like even first principles is turning into a buzzword in a sense, because it's like, it's just fascinating. Sorry,
it's like those cliche corporate phrases, like circling back, or just things that you just roll your eyes.
Exactly right.
So, but speaking of the synergies between his companies, how do you think that they all play a role with Mars?
Yeah, so I think the obvious ones are, Starlink is still a SpaceX company, but there's a lot of, I think even Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, talked about this too, about, making Starlink into its own public company, basically, splitting it out and making it go public. And when I use the word obviously here, it's not super obvious, but I think it's relatively obvious that Starlink is going to be the communications network on Mars. So there you have one. Tesla is going to be the transportation system on Mars, most likely, because you don't need fuel, you don't need oxygen to run it. It's just electricity, and you can generate electricity with solar panels. So there's another Tesla. You can store the energy using Tesla batteries, right? So there's another one.
Like the Mars Pathfinder, the Mars exploration rovers are solar powered. Energy is absorbed through solar arrays on panels that sit atop what look like the rover's wings. And they were designed to maximize the area of solar cells that collect the sun's energy. Of course, if you're learning more about the physics of harvesting energy from our sun, why don't you take this course on Brilliant? In Brilliant's solar energy course, you learn everything about getting energy from our most renewable source, the sun. You'll start from fundamental physics principles, and you'll learn about the principal methods of harvesting energy from sunlight, concentrated solar power, and photovoltaic cells. Now, of course, the best way to learn anything is by doing it yourself. And luckily for you, Brilliant's lessons are hands-on and extremely interactive, so they're not boring like most lecture videos. Brilliant has endless courses in computer science, math, science, and more. So join millions of people already learning on Brilliant with this special offer for you. Head to brilliant.org/Ellie in space to get started for free with these interactive lessons. Plus, the first 200 subscribers will get a 20% off deal of an annual membership.
Boring company could be the solution for transporting things from point A to point B. Say you're farther than X number of, yards or meters, kilometers. I'm sorry. I know people usually in the space industry like the metric system. My apologies. Kilometers away. But that becomes more of a powerful tool in that sense, because you don't have to navigate through the margin terrain. You can go underneath it with tunnels, right? So that becomes a another solution. I think what's really interesting about the Tesla piece as well is, if you start going down the road and say, okay, Tesla bot, right? Tesla bot is obviously going to be something that could be used for labor on Mars, where maybe the human part of it is too dangerous to do. So the bot could become a assistance to build things, or eventually it could become the thing that builds everything over time. So there's just a bunch of different things. And what got me thinking is like, okay, so if we're already setting up these pieces to make colonizing Mars a reality, what are some other things that the companies could work on that maybe they haven't released yet that are also going to play into that sort of equation? And that's where my brain has been going towards, to try and so I'm almost trying to predict Tesla's and other companies' product line into the next 5-10 years, just to see if, and then I say, okay, so if that's the case, is that also a play for Mars? And if that becomes a yes, then I think that gives me more confidence that something like that would happen. And so I always keep SpaceX within in my mind when I'm thinking about Tesla's potential product that they'll release. And again, this is for fun. This is what I do for fun. I'm just a freaking nerd. This is what I do for fun. But it's exciting to think about, because it really gets me going, and it creates amazing discussion within the community, which is really my favorite thing, is to just create discussion. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just, I love the discussion behind it. Yeah.
Sure. Do you care to share at least one of those predictions?
No, not at all. Of course. Yeah. So the big one that I've been thinking about quite a bit, I made a video about this not too long ago, probably like a couple of weeks ago, maybe even longer, but some sort of habitat system on Mars. And I think that's one that, so when I released the video, there was really good discussion in the comments. A fair number of people disagreed and a fair number of people agreed. And there was sort of discussions within the comments between the two sides. And that was truly my goal, was to get that going. But essentially the thought process is okay, so if you're SpaceX and you're Elon, the first question you have to ask yourself is, okay, so how many people do I need on Mars for it to be self-sustaining? Like, I just want to build it and forget about it. Okay. So the number is 1 million. Okay, cool. 1 million. So it makes sense to try and incentivize those 1 million people to get there as quickly as humanly possible, so you can get this thing up and running as quickly as humanly possible, so you can avoid any sort of cataclysmic events that could happen on Earth before that time. So speed is crucial, right? The speed of building out the colony is crucial. And that is my assumption. So, okay, so if that's the case, then what you need to do is you need to create an environment on Mars where people would at least want to somewhat go. Because we already know it's going to be incredibly difficult to live on Mars, especially that first, second, and third wave, right? It's just, you have to build everything out, okay? So in order to incentivize more people to go to Mars, I started thinking about, okay, so if I'm a person and I actually want to buy a ticket to go to Mars, okay, I would like it to be like, I know there's going to be a portion of the population that's going to go there regardless, because they're adventurers and that's what they want to do. They want to move society forward. But if you really want to increase that number, you have to start thinking about comforts in a way, like creature comforts. You have to start thinking about, how do I expand my pool size of people so that maybe those that are on the fence would want to go to Mars. And that's where the habitat idea came in mind. It's like, okay, so if you have a habitat on Mars that allows you to have it, as temperature controlled as possible, oxygenated, protected from, any radiation, and it's big enough so that you can actually build things within it, so like think of it as like a block size city street or something in New York, or like 2x2 block size in city street, something that you can fit, say, 1,000 people in. Then I think if you have something like that, then it becomes much more feasible for more people to go, because then you start thinking about, what are the logistics of somebody living on Mars? What does that look like? If you're not in Starship, you're going to be walking around in a suit building things, right? And that suit, at least from the research I've done, and I hope you can correct me if I'm wrong, the cheapest suit I could find that's made, I think, by NASA, it's like $130 million. It's like outrageously expensive.
Yeah. And
so one could make the argument that, okay, so if SpaceX gets in the game of spacesuits, they could bring that down by quite a bit, by say a factor of 10, and make it, say, $13 million. But that's still very expensive. And I feel like outfitting say 10,000 people in spacesuits seems like it's a daunting task, because if you're actively working on building a thing on Mars, you're going to run into movement issues, tear issues, and each single one of those units can become a sort of a liability, right?
I feel like hands down, Tesla bots need to build the thing. Like to me, there's just no question that like people should be constructing this thing, that. Not only just with the cost of like outfitting all those people, but also like the danger. To me, we got to get Tesla bots building the thing.
Yeah, for sure. But even before then, I think there's a case for humans building it so that more humans can come, where they don't have to say wear a spacesuit, as an example. So like, say the facilities you need on Mars to live in, the facilities you need on Mars to create the materials, whatever else you need. I'm thinking if you can have a habitat of some sorts that covers that part of the land where you can actively work without a spacesuit, to me makes a lot more sense than outfitting everybody with a spacesuit.
Right.
And that's sort of where the habitat equation came in. And I sat down and actually tried to do the math to see how much it would actually cost to build one of these things on Mars. And the number I came up with was somewhere between $5 and $7 billion per habitat per 1,000 people. So if you divide that by the 1,000, the per person cost of building and transporting all the materials from Earth to Mars for this habitat is roughly $6 million per person. And if a suit were to cost more than that, then the habitat makes more sense.
Right.
And that's sort of where my head's going, So, but if we had the bot on Mars to do that, great. That's obviously like the best possible outcome. But then the question becomes like, is the bot a 10-year thing, or is the bot on Mars like a 20-year thing? Because theoretically, you could do this thing on Mars if you're willing to spend $5 billion and Starship can get you there, right? You can do that thing the second Starship can get to Mars.
Right.
Whereas for the bot, you may have to wait a decade or two for that thing to get there, right?
You're right.
The other thing, so looking at that Marcia, I had never heard of that until I tried to do some research before this discussion.
Sure.
And it's it's kind of similar to what you're saying, but it's also 3D printing using the basalt rock that's on Mars. It's that whole in situ resource utilization, the same idea of the Sabatier process that we could, use elements on Mars to create rocket fuel. So that to me, because think about how much it would cost and to get construction materials to Mars, being able to use what is already on Mars, that is just genius to me.
Yeah.
If they can use the basalt, collect that, and then they were mixing it with something else and just, piping this 3D printed little not so little egg-shaped thing with multiple levels. They're saying on the first level, you can change out of your spacesuit, and then level 2, 3, 4 are more like you're like chilling at home, so
sure.
Kind of similar to what you're proposing, but not as big.
Right. And I think that the key thing there is like, I'm trying to solve for people being able to work without having a spacesuit on.
Yeah.
I think that's the key differentiator there, because like, I completely understand having a structure that allows you to rest there and to sort of like, just hang out for the night or whatever. But you still, when you go to work, you got to put on this freaking spacesuit on that might cost $10 million plus. Right.
Yeah.
But whereas if you had a habitat that like literally encapsulated like a block or two's worth of land, you're able to leave your cocoon or whatever thing you have, and you still wouldn't have to wear a suit theoretically or some sort of thing, because that habitat would have the right temperature and it would be oxygenated and things like that. It would have everything you need. It's just enclosed. And I think that's the key variable. I think having the ability to emulate Earth as much as humanly possible, this is my opinion, having the ability to emulate Mars as much as possible to Earth, I think that will encourage way more people to go way faster.
Yeah.
And if it's a $5 billion investment, like that's Elon can do that. I mean, Elon bought Twitter for $44 billion. You know what I'm saying? Like you could build 8 of these theoretically on Mars. You could have 8,000 people go there right away. You could say you don't even have to wear a suit. You're just hanging out. It's going to suck, but you don't have to wear a suit,
Now,
and it's,
because I know people will ask, tell me roughly how you got to that number.
Of course, I would love to. I have my spreadsheet right here.
Because I know
am
people are gonna be like, what, why, how?
Yeah, I would love that. And I have a full rundown of the video as well on my channel if you guys are interested. But
Okay.
essentially the way it looks, so here's the math that I did. I chose 300 series steel for the beams that would connect basically the habitat. Okay. Then for the and I'm assuming that was roughly, I think either 80 or 90% of the structure. I forget the exact math, but it's on the video. Then for the in between step, for the in between gaps between the steel structure, I said, okay, it's going to be something similar to say the Cybertruck glass, which is bulletproof and has all these different capabilities. And I'm assuming you can make it in some way to shield the radiation from the sun. That stuff people way smarter than me can figure that out for sure. So you also have that. But those materials, essentially between the 300 series steel and the glass, I'm assuming is going to be around $40 to $50 million for those materials. And then literally the rest of it is transportation. So like if it's $5 billion, the 400 and some odd the 4 point whatever billion dollars that's left over is getting the materials from Earth to Mars. Okay.
Right.
And a lot of people would say, okay, but that's idiotic because you have raw materials on Mars to do that. But then again, my thing goes back to, okay, true. But is this a 10-year thing, or is this a 20-year thing, or a 30-year thing, or a 50-year thing? Okay.
Right.
If you're willing to, like, you have to build something there to be able to build things.
Yeah.
You still got to get something there.
Right.
And I think the other thing that also makes this make a little bit more sense is that you could theoretically do that on Earth as well. You could have habitats on Earth. You could do it in frickin' Fargo, North Dakota, where like half the year it's winter. You could create a habitat and make it like California the entire year. Yes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there's a use case for these habitats on Earth before we even take it to Mars. And that's sort of where my video goes to, is like, okay, so there is a market for this here too. And the way Tesla and Elon sort of works these things is like, hey, let's do it here first and then take it to Mars. So, but I can keep going through the details, but like, that's essentially what it is. It's majority transportation. I think my thing says we need how many starships? I think we need 100. Let me see. Sorry, just give me 1 second here. Yeah, I think we need like 100. Yeah, 100 starships for the steel. To get it. 99.5 is what I came up with. So yeah, but that's sort of the math behind it.
So what's your company called?
Yeah. Farzad Misbahi doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
It sounds like you're ready to get going and have, we're all going to be vacationing in Fargo. Right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, this is one of the things that I think working at Tesla sort of like has ingrained into my brain, is like how, like, think of ideas and then if it makes sense, put it into paper, and then if it economically makes sense, try it. But I don't have the ability to try it. Like, this is literally the exact exercise I would have gone in Tesla if I'm trying to build something for the company.
Now, as I was pondering the idea of the urgency to get to Mars sooner than later, I came across this tweet from Liv Buree. And you may have read this paper, but if you haven't, it's called Astronomical Waste. And wow, it is kind of mind-blowing. The idea is that every second we delay expanding into space, we lose at least 100 trillion potential human lives that could have lived. The reasoning for this by the author Nick Bostrom is that every moment that passes, unimaginable amounts of unused but precious energy get sucked into black holes, and more stars and galaxies pass beyond our cosmological horizon each moment, and thus will forever be out of reach. So the idea, and of course Elon Musk shares this, is that if we don't expand the light of consciousness, then extinction will be our default. Now, of course, that is the whole mission of creating Starship and going to Mars, and something that Elon and his team are working diligently on. But it's an interesting idea of how soon do we need to get there, and how long will it actually take for something like TeslaBot to be functional to start building this community on Mars. And speaking of 3D printing, yes, I am still in love with my Starship lamp. Let's turn it on. Of course, it features my favorite color, pink. So yeah, while we're waiting for, the orbital launch and to see the actual Starship in action, we got this cool space lamp. And a couple of you have ordered it and I guess really like it. as do I. So I just thought that I would show you it again in case you didn't see it in the other video that I showed it off in. And of course, if you want one, this makes a great gift. So I will put that link in the description. So I want to know from you guys, what do you think the Mars habitats will look like? Do you think that we just need to wait until TeslaBot is up and running and that way, humans aren't in danger? Or do you agree with this argument that we shouldn't delay advancements of our civilization and we need to get there as soon as possible, and perhaps using something like Farzad's idea could be beneficial for all of us? Surfshark VPN is the sponsor of this video. As you know, sponsors help content creators like Ellie in Space to keep growing the channel and making better content. Surfshark is an app and a browser extension, but why would you even want it? It basically lets you place your computer or phone anywhere in the world and you can access internet as if you were in that country. So this also lets you unblock websites that you would usually not have access to see. It also adds an extra layer of security when you're online to keep all your passwords, videos, and photos safe. Like, we're talking the same level of VPN encryption that the US government uses. Surfshark is the only VPN to offer one account to use on an unlimited number of devices. And I have an awesome offer for you. You can use my code Ellie to get 83% off. Like, what? Also, sign up now and you can get 3 months for free. That's an even better deal. And if you aren't already convinced, yes, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. So go ahead and score this awesome deal at surfshark.deals/Ellie.